I think I've got something to add to that that's maybe useful. So astrology has been basically like this. It's like this pattern language that's been learned by millions of people over the course of 10,000 years, 8,000 years at least. Um, so these patterns that people have been seeing have been passed down to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. We're maybe in a time of kind of flowering where it's way more available to the average person. And also, in at least most Western countries, it's less. There's less of a taboo against it than there used to be. So you've got this pattern language that's been handed down, and it's got all these archetypes and these similarities and these ways that people are, and that's basically like it's almost like a cultural, mythos that's been handed down, and it goes outside of all the different, kinds of gods. It goes outside of just Greek and Roman gods,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
um, and there's all of these connections between all of our kind of past religious structures and astrology because it's gone through all those same phases that our culture has gone through over the course of time. Um, so, what you're really trying to figure out with astrology is the patterns within it, the archetypes, and then you just have it. It's like a pattern language that you understand. Um, and once you understand it, you'll want to know more, and you can talk to people about it. It's like you learn the language, you can talk with people about it. It's like do learning astrology is like Duolingo for spirit in some ways, you're figuring out all this information. um you're bouncing it off other people that know the same basic archetypes as you, and you're able to get a lot deeper in conversations with people. You're able to hear about different parts of their soul that you otherwise wouldn't be able to even access, or that would be harder to access because you have to have a shared language to talk about those things. And astrology is one of those tools that has this thousands of year old shared language that is actually like entwined with our culture. Um, and I think that's like why it's useful and that's why it's important to learn, I think, especially now. Um, but I'll always have to start somewhere, with it. So I hope that at the end of this podcast or at some point we're all the Astro Bros hanging out together, and are able to talk about it together. Um, but I understand that that's a road. I'll leave it at that for a
Not,
second.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I think like the biggest thing with all of this is it's just a language, as Mike says, to understand human beings. And we've, been bumbling and doing that for thousands of years. You can talk about philosophies, different mythologies, different ways of different religions, especially. It's all attempting to explain the same thing. It all comes back to I say the brain because I'm air dominant,
Mm-hmm.
but like whatever you want to call it, like the human being, the human psyche, the human experience, like you can categorize it however you want because it is just a language. But astrology's language has been developed for thousands of years. Whereas, like, if we talk about the language of psychology is in its infancy. Like, it's poking at the dark. It's just basically all psychology does is like when you go to a therapist, you it's reliant on how much you're willing to express and versus how much the therapist is willing or able to understand you. Whereas astrology gives us, it takes a step back and says, this is a quote unquote blueprint for how you are. Doesn't mean you're expressing all of it. It doesn't mean it's, but at least it gives a third thing that people can look at and go, okay, you might not be aware of yourself. And no human being is fully aware and fully actualized. That's the whole purpose of life.
Oh, for
But
sure.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so looking at the chart helps us to understand parts of ourselves, especially the parts that are hard. Like it's easy to be like, oh, well, I have Venus and Pisces, so I like to escape into movies and smoke some pot and blah, blah, blah. Just really cliche. But like, what does that explain about me? Not much.